The rejection letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, stamped with the official seal of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Captain Sarah Phoenix Rodriguez had been expecting it, but that didn't make the words any easier to read. Thank you for your application to the AH-64 Apache pilot program. After careful consideration, we have decided to pursue other candidates at this time. Sarah crumpled the letter and tossed it toward the trash can in her cramped base housing quarters. It bounced off the rim and landed on the floor next to 3 other identical rejection letters she'd received over the past 6 months. 4 rejections from 4 different Apache units, each with the same polite but firm message. Thanks but no thanks. She knew what they weren't saying. What they couldn't put in writing but what hung in the air during every interview, every evaluation, every time she walked into a room full of male pilots who looked at her like she was lost. At 5 feet 4 inches and 125 pounds, Sarah Rodriguez didn't look like their idea of an Apache pilot. She looked like someone's little sister who'd wandered into the wrong building. The fact that she could fly a Black Hawk helicopter with surgical precision, had completed 2 combat tours in Afghanistan, and held a degree in aerospace engineering from MIT seemed to matter less than the fact that she needed a booster seat to properly reach the Apache's controls. But Sarah had a secret that none of those rejection letters knew about. Hidden beneath the collar of her flight suit, covered by regulation scarves and high-necked undershirts, was a tattoo that told a story those recruiting officers had never bothered to learn. 3 months later, Sarah found herself at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, for what she'd been told was a final evaluation opportunity with the 101st Airborne Division's Apache unit. She'd almost turned down the interview. 4 rejections had been enough humiliation for anyone, but something in the recruiting sergeant's voice had convinced her to give it one more shot. The evaluation was scheduled for 0800 hours at the flight line, where she'd undergo the same battery of tests she'd failed to pass 4 times before. Physical assessment, technical knowledge examination, simulator evaluation, and the dreaded command presence interview where stern-faced officers would decide whether she had what it took to pilot the Army's most lethal attack helicopter. Sarah arrived 30 minutes early as was her habit, and spent the time reviewing technical manuals and checking her gear. At exactly 0755, she reported to the designated hangar where a group of pilots and instructors were gathered around a gleaming AH-64D Apache longbow. "You must be Rodriguez," said a weathered-looking warrant officer with graying temples. "I'm Chief Warrant Officer 4 Mike Thompson. I'll be conducting your evaluation today." Sarah snapped to attention. "Yes, sir." Captain Rodriguez reporting as ordered. Thompson looked her up and down with the kind of expression mechanics reserved for cars that probably wouldn't pass inspection. "Relax, Captain. This isn't boot camp." He gestured toward the Apache. "What do you see when you look at that bird?" Sarah studied the helicopter, 30 feet of armored death and precision engineering. "I see a weapons platform designed for close air support and anti-armor operations, sir. Twin turboshaft engines, 30mm chain gun, capacity for Hellfire missiles and 70mm rockets. Maximum speed 182 miles per hour, service ceiling 21,000 feet. Textbook answer, Thompson said dryly. "What else?" Sarah frowned, unsure what he was looking for. "Sir?" "Look closer, Captain. What do you really see?" Sarah walked closer to the Apache, running her eyes over every detail. The aircraft was immaculate, every surface polished, every component precisely maintained. But there, on the nose of the helicopter, she spotted something that made her heart skip a beat. Painted in small, barely visible letters beneath the cockpit was a name, Elena's Revenge. Sarah's hand unconsciously moved to her neck, where beneath her regulation undershirt, a tattoo bore the same name in elegant script, Elena Rodriguez. Her grandmother. The woman who had raised her after her parents died in a car accident when Sarah was 7. The woman who had been the first female aircraft mechanic in the Mexican Air Force. The woman whose stories of breaking barriers and proving doubters wrong had inspired Sarah to become a pilot in the first place. "Something wrong, Captain?" Thompson asked, noticing her sudden stillness. "No, sir. Just admiring the aircraft." The evaluation proceeded exactly as Sarah had expected. She aced the technical examination, scoring in the 99th percentile on questions about Apache systems, weapons capabilities, and tactical employment. Her simulator performance was flawless. She navigated complex combat scenarios with the kind of precision that came from years of flying in actual combat zones. But when it came to the physical assessment, the same old problems emerged. "Captain Rodriguez," said Major Patricia Wells, the evaluating officer, You understand that Apache pilots need to be able to physically handle the aircraft under extreme stress conditions? Yes, ma'am. And you understand that the Apache requires significant upper body strength to control during high-G maneuvers? Yes, ma'am, I understand. But with respect, ma'am, I've been flying combat helicopters for 6 years. I've never had a physical limitation that affected my performance. Major Wells made a note on her clipboard. The Apache is different, Captain. It's more demanding than a Black Hawk. We need pilots who can handle the stress. Sarah felt the familiar frustration building in her chest. Ma'am, I'd like the opportunity to demonstrate my capabilities in the actual aircraft. That won't be necessary. We have sufficient data from the simulator. The command presence interview was the final nail in the coffin. 3 field-grade officers sat behind a table, asking questions designed to assess her leadership potential and decision-making abilities under pressure. Captain Rodriguez, said Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison, how would you handle a situation where your crew chief questioned your ability to complete a mission? It was a loaded question. Sarah knew they weren't really asking about crew chiefs. They were asking how she'd handle the inevitable challenges to her authority that would come from being a small woman in a world of large men. Sir, I'd address the concern directly and professionally. If there were legitimate technical or safety issues, I'd want to hear them. If the questioning was based on personal bias rather than professional concerns, I'd make it clear that such attitudes have no place in a professional military unit. And if the questioning continued? Then I'd handle it through appropriate channels, sir. But in my experience, competence speaks louder than preconceptions. The interview continued for another 20 minutes, with questions that seemed designed more to find reasons to reject her than to assess her qualifications. By the time it was over, Sarah knew she'd failed again. She was gathering her gear to leave when Chief Thompson approached her. Captain, you got a minute? Yes, sir. Walk with me. They headed toward the flight line, where the late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the tarmac. Thompson was quiet for several minutes, seemingly lost in thought. You know, he said finally, I've been flying Apache helicopters for 18 years. Seen a lot of pilots come and go. Most of them fit the mold, big guys, loud voices, swagger like they own the sky. Sarah wasn't sure where this was going, so she remained silent. But you know what I've learned in all those years? The best pilots aren't necessarily the ones who look the part. They're the ones who understand that flying isn't about muscle, it's about precision, judgment, and the ability to make life-or-death decisions in split seconds. They stopped beside another Apache, this one bearing the name Phoenix Rising on its nose. That's an interesting call sign you've got, Captain. Phoenix, mind if I ask how you got it? Sarah had been dreading this question. Her call sign came from an incident during her second deployment in Afghanistan, when her Black Hawk had been shot down by enemy fire. She'd managed to auto-rotate the damaged aircraft to a hard landing, saving her crew and the soldiers they'd been transporting. When they'd crawled out of the wreckage, one of the soldiers had said she'd risen from the ashes like a phoenix. It's a long story, sir. I've got time. Sarah told him about the shoot-down, about the emergency landing, about the 2 hours they'd spent on the ground under enemy fire before a rescue team could reach them. She told him how she'd kept her crew calm and organized their defense until help arrived. Thompson listened without interruption, nodding occasionally. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. You know what I think, Captain? I think you've been getting rejected for all the wrong reasons. Size, gender, preconceptions about what a pilot should look like. But nobody's been asking the right question. What's the right question, sir? Can you fly the mission when everything goes to hell? Can you bring your crew home when the odds are stacked against you? Can you make the hard decisions when lives are on the line? Thompson turned to face her directly. From what I've seen today and from what I know about your record, the answer to all those questions is yes. Sarah felt a flicker of hope, but she'd been disappointed too many times to trust it. Sir, I appreciate that, but the evaluation board. The evaluation board sees what they expect to see. But there's someone else who needs to weigh in on this decision. Sir? Colonel Martinez. He's the final authority on pilot assignments for this unit. And he's got a different perspective than most. Sarah's heart sank. Another interview, another chance to be judged and found wanting. When does he want to see me? Right now. He's waiting in his office. The walk to the battalion headquarters felt like a march to execution. Sarah had heard about Colonel Eduardo Martinez, a legendary pilot with 3 combat tours and a reputation for being absolutely uncompromising when it came to standards. If the evaluation board had recommended against her, she couldn't imagine the colonel overruling them. Thompson knocked on the colonel's door and waited for permission to enter. Come. Colonel Martinez was a compact man in his early 50s, with steel-gray hair and intelligent dark eyes. His office walls were covered with photographs of helicopters, unit insignia and commendations spanning a career that had taken him from junior warrant officer to full colonel. "Sir," Thompson said, "this is Captain Rodriguez." "Captain," Colonel Martinez said, rising from behind his desk. "I've been reviewing your file. Impressive record. 2 combat tours, Distinguished Flying Cross, Bronze Star. MIT graduate. And 4 rejections from Apache units." "Yes, sir." "Sit down, Captain. We need to talk." Sarah took the offered chair, trying to read the colonel's expression. He was studying her with the kind of intensity that made her feel like she was under a microscope. "Tell me something, Captain. Why do you want to fly Apaches?" It was a question she'd been asked before, but something about the colonel's tone suggested he genuinely wanted to understand her motivation. "Sir, the Apache represents the pinnacle of attack aviation. It's the most advanced, most capable helicopter in the world. I want to be part of that mission." Textbook answer. "But that's not what I asked. Why do you want to fly Apaches?" Sarah took a breath, deciding to risk honesty. "Because I'm tired of being told I can't, sir. I'm tired of being judged by what I look like instead of what I can do. I want to prove that skill and determination matter more than fitting someone's preconceived notion of what a pilot should be." Colonel Martinez nodded slowly. "Better. More honest." He leaned back in his chair. "You know, Captain, I've been reading the evaluation reports from your previous interviews. They all say essentially the same thing: excellent technical skills, outstanding flying ability, but concerns about physical limitations and command presence." Sarah's heart began to sink again. "But you know what's interesting? None of those reports mention the most important qualification for an Apache pilot." "Sir?" "The willingness to fly into hell for your people. The ability to stay calm when everything around you is falling apart. The kind of courage that can't be measured in inches or pounds." Colonel Martinez stood up and walked around his desk, stopping directly in front of Sarah. "Captain, I'm going to ask you to do something that might seem unusual. I want you to remove your undershirt." Sarah's eyes widened in shock. "Sir?" "Don't worry, Captain. I'm not asking you to compromise your modesty. Just lower the neckline enough to show me what you're hiding under that regulation collar." Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her neck. How could he possibly know about the tattoo? "Sir, I don't understand." "Captain Rodriguez, I knew your grandmother." The world seemed to stop. Sarah stared at the colonel in disbelief. "You, what?" "Elena Rodriguez. Master Sergeant Elena Rodriguez, Mexican Air Force, attached to the U.S. Army as a liaison mechanic during the Gulf War. I was a young warrant officer then, flying Apaches with the 1st Cavalry Division. Your grandmother kept our birds flying when everyone said it couldn't be done." Sarah's throat felt tight. She never mentioned. She probably wouldn't have. Your grandmother was modest about her achievements. But I remember her. Small woman, maybe 5 feet tall, weighing about as much as a spare tire. But she could diagnose engine problems that stumped mechanics twice her size. She could work miracles with damaged aircraft. Colonel Martinez returned to his chair, his expression softening. "More importantly, she saved my life. February 1991, during the ground offensive. My Apache took heavy damage from anti-aircraft fire. Most of the mechanics said the bird was done, too much damage to the transmission, flight controls shot to hell. But your grandmother spent 36 straight hours rebuilding that aircraft. When she was done, it flew like new." Sarah felt tears building in her eyes. "She never told me about the war. She just said she fixed helicopters." Your grandmother understood something that a lot of people miss, Captain. It's not about how big you are or how loud you can yell. It's about having the skill, the determination, and the heart to do what needs to be done. The colonel leaned forward. "Now about that tattoo. I'm guessing it's her name, Elena Rodriguez, probably in script, probably right about here." He pointed to his own neck. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. "Show me." With trembling hands, Sarah lowered the collar of her undershirt, revealing the elegant script tattoo. Elena Rodriguez, 1952 to 2018. Colonel Martinez smiled for the first time since she'd entered his office. "I thought so. Your grandmother talked about you, you know. During those long nights in the maintenance hangar, she'd tell me about her granddaughter who wanted to be a pilot. She was so proud of you." "She died 2 years ago," Sarah whispered. "I know. I was at the funeral. You probably didn't notice me, there were a lot of people there. Your grandmother touched a lot of lives." The colonel stood up again, this time moving to his window that overlooked the flight line. "Captain Rodriguez, I'm going to tell you something that those evaluation boards don't understand. Flying in Apache isn't about physical strength. Modern helicopters are fly-by-wire systems. The computer does most of the heavy lifting. What matters is precision, judgment, and the ability to think clearly under pressure. He turned back to face her. Your grandmother had those qualities. Based on your record, so do you? The question is, are you ready to prove it? Sarah's heart began to race. Sir? Report to the flight line at 0600 tomorrow morning. Full flight gear. You're going to get your chance to fly the Apache. Sir, the evaluation board. The evaluation board makes recommendations. I make decisions. And I've decided that Elena Rodriguez's granddaughter deserves the same chance her grandmother gave me, the chance to prove that heart and skill matter more than appearances. Colonel Martinez returned to his desk and picked up a file folder. Captain, you'll be assigned to Lieutenant Colonel Harrison's squadron. I'm sure he'll have some concerns about my decision, but he'll follow orders. And once you show him what you can do, those concerns will disappear. Sarah stood up, still trying to process what was happening. Thank you, sir. You won't regret this. I know I won't, Captain. Your grandmother's legacy lives on in you. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. As Sarah reached the door, Colonel Martinez called out one more time. Captain? Your grandmother would be proud. The next morning, Sarah stood on the flight line at 0559, watching the sun rise over the Apache helicopters that would finally be hers to fly. She touched the tattoo on her neck, thinking about her grandmother's words. Mija, they will try to tell you what you cannot do. But they cannot tell you who you are. Chief Thompson approached with a flight helmet and a smile. Ready to make some history, Phoenix? Sarah took the helmet and looked at the Apache that would be her mount for training. The same bird she'd admired the day before, Elena's revenge, painted proudly on its nose. More than ready, Chief. Let's go flying. As she walked toward the helicopter, Sarah knew that some barriers were meant to be broken, some ceilings were meant to be shattered, and some tattoos carried the power to change everything. Elena Rodriguez had paved the way. Now it was her granddaughter's turn to fly.